Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got a high wind watch on the hazardous weather graphic today for the eastern Alaska range here west of the Tok Cutoff. And this is out for actually Tuesday, starting Tuesday morning and continuing into the evening or until evening Tuesday, as winds are expected to increase and gust over 60 miles per hour, above 60 miles per hour here through mainly the passes there of the eastern Alaska range. So moving on and coming back to today's weather, we've got a lot of moisture here flowing northward, a good south to north jet developing here by evidence of the orientation of the cloud field there. And that's bringing rain, not all that heavy yet, over the southeast coast. A little heavier, picked up about 2/3 of an inch today around Yakutat, at Yakutat in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon, with areas of rain back along the North Gulf Coast, down into Kodiak Island. Another trough here, mostly along and off the coast, bringing some precipitation, mostly in the form of snow, wet snow there in the Pribilof Islands today. They picked up about 1/10 of an inch water equivalent today. Some of that falling is snow, but again, that's temperatures above freezing there this afternoon. And then a break here for the Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula, although Chignik did pick up about 4/10 of an inch of rain today. Good break here over the central northern interior. Looks like Fairbanks right in the sun zone there. Northward to about the Brooks Range area. And then chillier temperatures north of the mountains there out to the Arctic coast. And you can see that low center near the Pribilofs, the upper level low. And the next front out here to the west, driving eastward pretty good with a good west-southwest jet in this area developing. The main low center hanging back towards Shimya with gusty winds, rain and fog there today. And then the rain and gusty winds here with the front coming across the central Aleutians. Just about ready to slide on into Nikolsky and the Fox Islands here this evening. And rolling that again, you can see this front here mostly coming south to north, as I pointed out earlier, was going to kind of stall out here for a day or so and not really move all that much. On today's chart, you can see that it's pushed northward to roughly about this position here. Gale force winds along the southeast coast developing throughout the day today, as well as the North Gulf Coast as well. And anywhere from gusts up as high as 50 miles per hour. Notice gusts at about 40 miles an hour southern Prince William Sound today, but rain also falling. Klawock picking about 1/1500ths of an inch of rain during the day today, actually 1/1700ths to be exact there for the precipitation amount. Portage Glacier, half an inch, half an inch falling. And Kodiak about 1/4 of an inch there. A little bit lighter, but that southeast flow keeping wet conditions in throughout the day and into the afternoon, probably continuing this evening. This trough off the coast, off the southwest coast, affecting Nunivak Island there with some snow, as well as the Pribilofs of the main low center, but the bulk of this moisture now offshore, just grazing the southwest coast, Cape Neuenham, where winds were gusting up to about 40 miles an hour this afternoon. And also here from the Seward Peninsula southward, across the southwest interior, pretty breezy conditions, easterly winds 20 to 30 miles per hour. Some areas higher elevation seeing gusts above 40 miles an hour. Lighter winds and the sunshine here up to the north and northeast across the interior areas. And that next front pushing eastward across the Aleutians. We'll see tonight makes a pretty good jog. Again, caught up in that strong southwest jet. Pushed right into the East Fox Islands there, frontal passage near Unalaska at about 4 a.m. Rain, winds spreading into the Alaska Peninsula on up to the Pribilof Islands. This trough kicking inland here with rain and snow coming along with it into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta areas, possibly southern Kuskokwim Valley, but amounts will be light by comparison. as it tends to weaken as it does kick in. A break right behind it, not very big though. And another low pressure area here over the western Aleutians keeps it windy and unsettled with numerous showers of rain and snow. And again, the gale force winds will continue here along the southeast coast tonight, but end for the North Gulf Coast as that front presses up toward the coastline. Gradient weakens. Not the case here for the Panhandle. Stays pretty windy along the coast throughout the night tonight with the heaviest precipitation in the north, lightening up and tapering off as you head south down toward Dixon Entrance. No change up here over the interior areas. Maybe a little breezier south of the Brooks Range there from the White Mountains on up. Mainly higher elevations. Could see gusts 30, 35 miles an hour. Lighter winds again for the Arctic coast. Mostly or will be dry with some areas of clearing even out along the Arctic coast. And moving on to the forecast for Monday, first day of the week. Work week looks like this. It looks wet here for the Panhandle. Loose gale force winds now, but this front weakening in about the same positions, lying just about perpendicular to the, or parallel to the wind flow aloft there, so it's not really making much eastward progress and hanging up along the North Gulf Coast as well. Actually, this is kind of one impulse from it moving northward, trying to bring a little bit of moisture in north of the Alaska Range, but it's going to have a really hard time doing it. Most of the showers will be along and south of the range. Just some clouds getting north of the mountains. Maybe some isolated rain and snow showers developing here. Southern Brooks Range, northern Koyukuk Valley. That's about it. Otherwise, partly to mostly sunny weather. Again, over the interior and getting kind of breezy here in the northwest. Be one area of kind of windy conditions. And another area will be associated with this front and the big storm out over the Bering Sea as the front moves eastward and northward. Looks like pretty good wind along with rain for the Alaska Peninsula. And again, rain right along the coastline there. This trough continues to weaken, so some scattered rain and snow showers with that feature. Not all that significant. Scattered showers trying to develop into a general area of rain by late afternoon here along the southwest coast in toward Bristol Bay. Definitely rain, possibly heavy at times from areas, say, from Chignik on down, Cold Bay, over to Falls Pass, breaking out to showers behind the front, lighter winds, and then an increase in the wind. Maybe gusts to 50, 60 miles an hour, this trough as it swings across the central Aleutians. And then the colder air following in behind here drops those snowfall levels down close to sea level with numerous rain and snow showers. Outlook for Tuesday, low center pulls northward here just south of St. Lawrence Island by late in the afternoon at 979 millibars. And again, several troughs rotating around the south side of this system. Another one coming through and keeping it quite windy again. Looks like winds gusts 50 miles an hour with rain or showers definitely for the central Aleutians. More southwesterly on the winds, 40 to 50 miles an hour here for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula areas. This trough really weakening as it approaches the southwest coast from what it was earlier. And that'll just keep it unsettled there for Bristol Bay along the Kuskokwim Delta into the Bay area there. And showers gradually diminishing, but staying quite breezy even all the way out to the Shimiatu area. See the tighter gradient here, especially along the North Gulf Coast. Possible storm force winds, maybe, definitely gales here back from the North Gulf Coast areas, Barren Islands. Kodiak, rain, heavy at times, windy conditions. And then the high wind watch in effect for Tuesday here for the eastern Alaska Range. And looking at low temperatures tonight, below zero for the North Slope. Otherwise, pretty mild here, southern Alaska, mostly above freezing to lower 40s in the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, lower 50s, Tanana Valley, Susitna Valley. Otherwise, 30s and 40s, except north of the Brooks Range, where it will be again in that 10 to 15 degree range for the highs. And lows maybe staying above zero, right around the 0 degree mark there for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Upper 30s, mid 30s to near 40s, southern Alaska. And then the highs for Tuesday, maybe 50 to 55 for the Tanana Valley, near 50 for the Susitna Valley, and upper 40s for the Panhandle. Staying chilly up along the Arctic coast, but not quite as cold as you have been, with highs reaching into the mid-teens.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather graphics here, lots of VFR over the interior once again. IFR there grazing the central Arctic coast, and then some marginal VFR right along the northwest coast here, down the north side of Seward Peninsula. And then IFR, a band from Prince William Sound eastward here in across the northern Panhandle, and another band right off the coast. IFR Kodiak east side down, and then excuse me, back up across northeast Bristol Bay. So Looks kind of IFR is to start the day around King Salmon, northwest, and then more widespread IFR in areas out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, but notice Fox Island starting out VFR. And then that goes marginal by the afternoon. All the IFR now up over the northern Bering Sea, except for the central there out in the middle of nowhere. IFR along and south of the Alaska Peninsula. Got a little bit of an increase in marginal VFR over the interior, but nothing too serious. IFR here along the central western Alaska Range, North Gulf Coast persisting in across the northern Panhandle, down across the border. Also looks like about Sitka on south, Port Alexander, Prince of Wales Island to Dixon Entrance. A little bit more IFR than what you start the day with. And then for Tuesday morning, looks like VFR for these areas, right from Prince of Wales Island right up through the central interior there of the Panhandle, marginal off the coast to the North Gulf Coast, up to the Wrangell Mountains, and IFR here still along and on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, Barren Islands, on up into Prince William Sound, western Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, mainly the east side, and IFR eastern Arctic coast, locally on the north slope as well. So the northwest coast and the Auckland-Kilbrook Mountains, otherwise marginal VFR for the Aleutians, Bering Sea. And for Tuesday afternoon, a little bit more widespread IFR conditions up there in the north slope and the Arctic coast, and also along the central eastern Brooks Range. And persisting here, actually expanding IFR across the Alaska Range there from the west on up to possibly over toward maybe Isabel Pass, back down across the Talkeetnas. Definitely more widespread IFR here for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, east side of the Kenai Peninsula, on over to Yakutat, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay areas toward the passes, but mainly south, and then gradually improving, but not a whole lot as you head down the southeast coast. Marginal for the Aleutians, Bering Sea. VFR breaking out over Bristol Bay and areas of the southwest interior, Kuskokwim Valley. And Atuvik, VFR becoming marginal tomorrow. Same forecast for Adigan, VFR becoming marginal. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, we've got marginal VFR with that same pattern, lower conditions on both eastern entrances. IFR likely for rainy on the eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. And for windy, marginal VFR, southern entrance, otherwise VFR, especially off to the north. And for Isabel, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And Mintesta, marginal VFR with IFR there on the southern entrance. And for Tanita, marginal VFR to start the day with, gradually becoming VFR, probably by early afternoon, if not sooner. And for Portage, looks like same pattern, IFR eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. And for Chilcoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet here over the southwest interior, on up into about the central Tanana Valley Monday morning. At the surface, seems to be getting farther to the north here, north of St. Matthew Island now in the Bering Sea, and across the southwest interior, on down across the east side of the the southeast coast, and 4,000 feet over the extreme southern Panhandle, and 2,000 feet just barely reaching the Alaska Peninsula. Icing quite a few areas here. One band right through here from St. Lawrence Island eastward across the Yukon Delta and the southern Cook Inlet, scattering out for Kodiak Island. More widespread, more solid and widespread area of icing here for the North Gulf Coast from western Prince William Sound on down to just about all, but not including the southern Panhandle. This area just catching the Alaska Peninsula, and then a couple more areas on out across the Aleutians. Jet stream, one trough digging southward, and jet coming south, good southwest jet here, about 150 knots, splitting right through here, wrapping around this low, the other center down, and then south, the north flow, 90 knots into the Panhandle. 9,000 feet, 35 to 50 knots into the southeast coast, and rather windy, but not that bad, 25 to 35 at the southwest coast, windier though for the eastern Aleutians. And at 3,000 feet, 45 to 50 knot winds along the Panhandle on the coast, and 25 to 35 here over the Bering Sea. Westerlies up to 55 knots on the south side of that low center. And with that possible severe turbulence below about 5,000 feet, otherwise southeast coast looks pretty moderately turbulent.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us today is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thank you. And you're joining us here to talk a little bit more about satellites and how satellites work, and especially one neat feature that's working over Alaska right now. What is that?
Well, there's a lot of weather satellites and a lot of instruments on these satellites, and there are new generations going up and new instruments. This includes something called the day-night band, which is not a cover band at the local bar, but it's a new satellite that is very useful, especially here in Alaska, especially in the winter.
In the wintertime, yeah, that makes it a little bit hard to use some of the normal tools that we associate with weather satellite imagery.
Right. You know, one of the classic weather satellite instruments is just visible light. What would the human eye see if you were riding on a weather satellite yourself and looked down and it was black and white? You'd see the clouds reflecting the sunlight. And we've got an example from the Pacific Ocean. There's a geostationary satellite, and we can see that the eastern side of the image is in daylight. The western side, it's night over there, so you don't see anything because there's no sunlight over there. And visible imagery, it's very intuitive. You see the clouds just like you see them standing on the ground, but now you're a satellite seeing them from above. But the problem is, what about the night side of the planet? How do you track the storms? How do you know where the rain is, the snow, the weather, if you can't see the clouds? And that's why, just like a television can change from one channel to another, or a radio can change stations, satellites can change the frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that they're looking at. We can go to infrared instead of visible light. You know, it's heat energy. You can see heat, and we've got another satellite picture from the same time, same satellite, out over the Pacific Ocean. That's the infrared side, and we're seeing temperature there. And even at night, when there's no light, everything still has a temperature.
So we're sensing something with a thermometer instead of perhaps the visible side of that, is what you're saying?
That's right. On this depiction, colder features are lighter shades, warmer features are dark. And so clouds tend to be colder than the ground. Clouds are higher in the atmosphere, it's cooler. And so that very same image on the western or the left-hand side of the globe, now we can see the clouds there, even though it's nighttime, because we're seeing the temperatures. And one nice feature is that tropical storm there, just in the middle of the northern hemisphere there, hurricane or typhoon, depending on...
That's that swirly part that we see in the middle of the image?
There you go. You can even see the eye on it there, especially in the infrared image. So we've got two kinds of imagery there from the same satellite, different instruments, you know, different channels like on a television, visible and infrared. You know, it turns out there's no one magic tool. Each has its strengths, each has its flaws, weaknesses. The visible is nice, it's intuitive, it's easy to understand, but doesn't work at night. Infrared is nice, it works at night, you can see temperatures, but there is a catch. What if your clouds and the nearby bare ground or open water, what if those were about the same temperature?
Oh, that's going to be hard to figure out what's going on.
If you can only see temperature and you have two features that are the same temperature, they will look the same. You won't be able to tell. They're camouflaged. This happens, especially, it can happen around Alaska, especially over the ocean when you have low clouds that are the same temperature as the open water.
That happens quite a bit in Alaska.
We have an example. Now, this is from a different geostationary satellite. It's down over the Atlantic Ocean. Look in the South Atlantic. In infrared, we've highlighted in a yellow circle there. There's some patches of clouds, but it looks like there's a clear area in the middle of that image. That's the infrared look. But let's take a look at the visible channel, and we can see there's a stripe of clouds across the middle of that circle that is only visible in the visible. The trick here is that those are low clouds of about the same temperature as the surrounding ocean. So from an infrared point of view, where you're seeing temperature, the clouds in the water nearby are the same temperature, they look the same. It's only on the visible that you can see what stands out as the actual imagery. Two tools, each have their strengths and weaknesses. Can we combine them? That's where the day-night band comes in. It's a super sensitive visible sensor that can actually see by moonlight. It can even see the aurora. And in Alaska, we have long winter nights. We can use that day-night band. Here's an example from that storm that blew the Kullik drilling platform ashore near Kodiak Island in December back in 2012. This image is right near when that storm happened, and it's in the middle of the night in December.
But this looks like visible imagery.
Looks like daytime imagery. It's amazing. That sensor can take any little bit of moonlight and just make the most of it. We can see so much detail. Even in the northern part of the image there, you can see some aurora up there. The northern lights
That's that band that goes across the Arctic slope?
You got it. That's the northern lights. We're seeing black and white image here, so you don't get the green or the purple colors there. But that is the aurora. There's another example of the day-night band, and this is from January of 2013. It's about 4 in the morning, And this is a snapshot from Weather Service software. And we can even see in the middle of the image, there's the lights of Fairbanks and North Pole over to Eielson Air Force Base. Anchorage and Matsu lights, city lights, are evident as well.
Sure
We can see, even though it's 4 in the morning in January, there is no sunlight to be had, that just enough moonlight is available that this sensor can see that. So we're trying to solve that puzzle where visible light is good, but only during the daytime. IR is good at night, but you can't see the difference between clouds and ground sometime.
Right.
The day-night band is an attempt to do the best of both with one tool. And it's brand new for Alaska here, and we're hoping to use it in the forecast process and help predict storms, weather patterns, to help get good forecasts for people.
Okay, another tool in the weather toolkit for meteorologists in Alaska and researchers worldwide. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And you can learn more about Dehne and the day-night band by going to the web address that you see on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis showing actually some new ice forming here in the stretch between Point Hope and Kivalina up here in the north, the cold air and the winds coming into that area. Otherwise, sea ice free now north of St. Lawrence Island, really south of there, south of Norton Sound. This all that's left of Bering Sea ice, and the forecast is for the next few days continue drifting west and southwest and the slow melt. Moving on to coastal water forecasts, gales hang on to the north coast through tomorrow afternoon, the entire day, and then fall back down below gale force. But looking at storm force gusts here, south 30, gust 50 knots on the south coast, southeast 35, gust 50 knots in over Stevens Passage or Clarence Strait. Stevens Passage, pretty good wind in there tomorrow, southeast 30, gust 45 knots, northerly canal 25 knots with out of the south with 5-foot seas. And moving on to the outlook for Tuesday, now we've got gales in northern Canal, 35 knots from the south, gust to 50. Much lighter winds down south here, becoming variable to northwest at 15 for Clarence Strait, west-southwest 15 here on the south coast, and southwest 20, but still small craft advisories up north, and then Stevens Passage south 25 knots as well. And moving on to the Prince William Sound zone for tomorrow, east 20 knots, 5-foot seas, southeast 15 for the North Gulf Coast, down from the gales today, east 15 for the west side. Barren Islands, not too bad, southeasterlies at 15 knots, east 20 for Kachemak Bay, and northeast 20, stronger winds now north of the Forelands for Cook Inlet with seas at about 6 feet. Looking ahead to Tuesday, gales back in the picture here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 35 knots out of the south, and southeasterlies at 30 knots for Prince William Sound with seas at about 9 feet, southeast 30 for the western North Gulf Coast, and gales coming back to the Barren Islands from the south at 35 knots, those seas building to 16 feet, and southeast up to 40 knots for Kachemak Bay, and easterlies increasing to 30 knots there for the southern Cook Inlet area, 13-foot seas, and lighter winds up north. Kodiak Island tomorrow, east side here, southwest 25 knots, southerlies 15 for Shelikof Strait, southwest 25, Sitkinak to Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, south at 30, and actually south 30 is good for the entire peninsula for tomorrow, southeast 25, small craft advisories for Bristol Bay. And then for the Tuesday outlook, we've got minimum gales up to 35 knots, which is a minimum gale there for the east side of Kodiak Island with seas at about 18 feet. Shelikof Strait, 30-knot winds. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southwesterlies at 30. And then a little stronger, but crosses the threshold there. So we've got gales for the Alaska Peninsula out of the southwest, 35 knots with those seas building up to 21 feet in the Pacific side and about 15 on the Bering Sea side. And small craft advisories continue for the Bristol Bay zone. And out in the Aleutians, we've got gale force winds out here as well tomorrow, 35 to 40 knots, northwest turning southwest at 40 there east of Kiska Island, and then 35 to 40 knot winds for Adak and Atka, 25 to 30 knot small craft advisory winds here for the Fox Islands. Looking ahead to Tuesday, those pick up to gale force, all 40 knots out of the southwest here for the Fox Islands, Westerlies 35 to 40 for the central Aleutians, gradually falling back to about 30 knots. Small craft advisories there for the western Aleutians with seas hanging in at 17 feet. Southwest coast tomorrow, southeast winds 30 knots there with 8 to 9 foot seas. East 30 for St. Matthew Island. Southerlies at about 30 knots for St. Paul with 10 foot seas. St. Lawrence Island, south winds at 30 with 13 foot seas. And then for, not quite ready for the Arctic coast, and then for the outlook for Tuesday here, southerlies 25 to 30 knots for the coast, 30 knots out of the south for the Pribilofs, northeast 30 for St. Matthew Island, and these easterly winds, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, down to 20 knots. Now for the Beaufort Sea coast, east side, easterlies 20 knots tomorrow, 15, a little lighter there for the central coast. Brisk wind advisories for the west side here all the way down to Cape Thompson to Wales, to Wales, east at 20. And the outlook for Tuesday, no change here, east 20, and then from Cape Thompson and the west side, brisk wind advisories again, as well as the eastern Beaufort Sea coast toward demarcation point, looking at brisk wind advisories, otherwise at about 20 knots for the central coast. And for tonight, again, this front stalling out along the North Gulf Coast and off the Panhandle. It's going to keep the gales going tonight here for this Panhandle. Beginning to diminish for the North Gulf Coast as the system weakens but stays wet, as you can see, right on down into Kodiak. This trough brings a chance of rain or snow, probably mostly snow after midnight here through the southwest interior, and more rain and wind pushing your driving eastward as that front rides in on a strong southwest jet there at the main low center back toward the western Aleutians. And that all shifts eastward tomorrow a little bit here. This front pushing eastward, wind and rain. Alaska Peninsula approaching the coast, stays wet North Gulf Coast, losing the gales for the Panhandle again, but holding on through the afternoon on the north coast. Dry over the interior with variable clouds. And then on Tuesday, a big storm moves up towards St. Lawrence Island. Strong front, high wind watches out for the eastern Alaska Range through the passes for gusts above 60 miles an hour. And gales or storm force winds for the North Gulf Coast, a very tight gradient. Windy conditions across south central Alaska and Prince William Sound. Windy and showery for the Aleutians.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.